I am honored to introduce our guest speaker this morning. Now, I've never introduced this gentleman before. As a matter of fact, I hardly know this gentleman. But I will tell you that we've only ever met once, as I recall, and it was very briefly because we were at a Unity convention and it was going so smoothly. And Debbie Allen, who was running the convention, was relaxing. And I said, well, you look relaxed. And she said, well, I have Shad running the inside and you running the outside. All is good. and so we waved as we went past each other and went back inside. But Shad brings just talk about somebody that's called to be. Shad's mother and father are both Unity ministers. His Santisha is she a Unity minister as well, Santisha?
Yes.
Yeah, so his sister Santisha is a Unity minister in Boulder, Colorado. Shad was raised in Unity, YOU, Uniteens. He served in leadership positions in local and regional and national Uniteens. He also has a career as a production specialist, an event specialist, and so he's perfect for running the inside of a convention. And he was, he even, I understand he was quite the shark in Las Vegas for 5 years. During the day, he was at the MGM, and on the weekends, he was at the Unity Church, doing whatever he did there. I think he was running a Gamblers Anonymous meeting.
Not a card shark, though.
No, not a card shark. Never would accuse you of that, Reverend Shad. So not to shark us at all this morning, but to talk about raising the bar in Unity. I'm pleased to introduce the Executive Director of Unity Worldwide Ministries, Reverend Shad Groverland. Thank you, Shad.
My absolute pleasure, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this experience and a part of your Sunday service. It's always a pleasure to get out and meet some of the communities virtually or in person as much as I can. So I will share a little bit about myself. I am Reverend Shad Groverland, Executive Director of Unity Worldwide Ministries. And what some people don't know is that in our movement, we are blessed to have two organizations that serve us and help us spread this message. The first is Unity World Headquarters, which is headed up by Reverend Jim Blake. And Unity World Headquarters oversees the printing and the publishing, Daily Word, Unity Magazine. They also own the grounds of Unity Village, and they do the Silent Unity Prayer Service and hotline if you've ever called into that. Unity Worldwide Ministries, the organization that I work with, we have the seminary, the school that ordains and credentials Unity ministers, licensed Unity teachers, youth and family leaders. And we also do all the support for the ministries and the ministers themselves as they're doing ministry. So we are sort of your direct link to doing ministry and what you consider ministry right now, which is online and changing every day. So we help with that. Okay, let's now get serious. Why am I here? Now, I'm not asking that question from my personal perspective. I'm asking you to ask that question of yourself right now. Just think in your own mind, why am I here? Not necessarily on the planet, not that big, and not necessarily in this body, but why am I here in this service this morning? Let's get that specific. Why am I here in this service this morning? Now, when we think about what brings people to Unity, oftentimes we find they've had a struggle or a hardship in their life, and they've become a seeker. They're looking for answers. They're looking for hope. They're looking for something to bring them out of the darkness that they might currently be in or the perceived darkness they're experiencing. And so whatever the path might be, they find their way into a Unity. So for many people, they say, well, that's why I'm here. I had a hardship. That's how I found my way, or I was seeking. I found my way into Unity. But what often comes to my mind is, well, what keeps us here? For some people, that's community. They came, they found community, the fellow congregants, the minister, the staff, they found that aspect of being with other people, and that's why they stayed, that's why they stuck around. So for some people, that might be the answer is, well, I'm here because I had a hardship or I was seeking, and I've stuck around because I found community. So then the question comes to mind that, and if you're not going to notice this yet, I ask myself a lot of questions. So this is going to be part of my talk. Where am I going? Again, not as Shad Groverland, where's he going? Where am I going as an individual? I invite you yourself to ask that question. When you think about you're in Unity, you're in this service, you're a part of this community, but where are you going? Where are you going a part of this process? When you think about, well, what's ahead? What's to come? What's the direction? What's on the path? Well, what is that? Have you pondered that? Have you pondered where you're going in this direction? When we say the word path, it normally equates to a direction. A path leads somewhere. Most of us probably recognize we're on a path of some sort, but where's it going? Have you asked yourself that question? Has the community asked itself that question? So ultimately, it comes down to, what is my direction in unity? I found unity for whatever reason. I've stuck around. I'm here. Now, what is my direction? I asked this question of myself as I was growing up in unity. I would say, well, where are we going? What's the plan? What's the path? What's the direction? What am I doing here? I can become president of my YOU. I can get ordained and become a minister. I can get on the board of trustees. I can get on my regional board. I could do these things, but what's the ultimate direction? What am I ultimately trying to accomplish here? Well, if you're familiar with our founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, which I hope you are, I assume you are. It's safe to say that. If you're familiar with them, they set a very high bar for us on this path we call unity. Now, when you look at them personally and the journeys they went through, each of them has a healing story. Myrtle being obviously the tuberculosis that she went through in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the prayer work and the affirmation work and denial work she did to heal herself of that ailment, that accomplishment that she did in her life through these tools that we now share in unity. And you look at Charles Fillmore and what he did with his injury in his leg and the infections he had in his body, and the right side of his body was starting to entirely shut down because of that injury. And you looked at, he healed himself of that as well, not through medicine and doctors, but through his own consciousness and his work and the same tools that we teach today in unity, we know that they used at that time. But it wasn't just about them and themselves, and not even just about their children and their family. This healing work touched thousands of people around the world during the Fillmore's time, and thousands more since that time. They were healers. If you really want to summarize what these two individuals were, they were healers. Healers of mind, body, spirit, consciousness. That's what they did. And they trained other people to be healers as well during that time. And Myrtle Fillmore had her own specific group of healers that she was training and had around her to help her do this work. Oftentimes it was married couples so that they could do this work together, healing other people, doing remote healing, distance healing through letters, also physical healing, spiritual healing in person at the grounds and at the temple in the plaza in Kansas City. So these were healers. I want us to really think about what that means. They weren't just talking about the idea of healing. They weren't just conceptualizing the idea of healing. They were actually doing these healings on themselves, facilitating this healing coming through others of mind, body, soul, spirit, spiritual healing. Now we have today Myrtle's Healing Letters, this book that just puts together some of these conversations she had, some of this healing work she did over her lifetime, so we can see this process, but it only is a small snippet of all the work she was doing at that time and all the letters and correspondence she was going through. So they set this really high bar for us, the power to heal not only our own body, our own consciousness, but also facilitate the healing of those around us and eventually the healing of the entire planet. That's a pretty high bar that they have set. What sometimes happens in unity, and I'm not going to say this is happening at your ministry, but this does happen at Ministries, is we have lowered that bar so it's more attainable for us. We've looked at it and we said, well, yeah, there's this opportunity for healing, but we just do a little bit of prayer work. We just do a little bit of this and that. We have very low expectations of the outcomes of these things because it's kind of a fantasy thing. We look back on this power of healing and sometimes we think of it as a fantasy. They heal themselves, yes, but I'm not sure I could do that today. They were in special circumstances. They were surrounded by special people. It was a different time. We lower the bar of our expectations in unity to becoming just, I'm going to show up, I'm going to listen to a message, I might feel a little bit better about my life, I'm going to go about doing what I do in my average day. We have this saying in unity, we want to meet people where they are. And it's very important to meet people where they are. Many of us here in this service today probably came with a hardship into unity, whatever it might have been, or we came seeking. And it's important that unity has the tools to meet us at that place, to help us heal in that place. but we don't want to leave people in that place. So we oftentimes do heal them of whatever that circumstance was that comes in to brought them into the ministry. And I saw this in my first ministry at Unity of Las Vegas. I would see people coming in with a hardship. They were going through a divorce. They'd experienced a loss of a loved one, a parent, something else like that, relationship issues, or they just become a parent themselves and they were looking for spiritual guidance on how to raise their kids. Whatever it might be, they came. And I might counsel with them one-on-one. I might have my prayer chaplains work with them. I might give a series of talks that they received exactly what they needed to hear. And what happened? They left. They came to heal that particular instance, that particular hardship, and then they left. And I saw that happening over and over. And I would talk to my minister counterparts in my region, and they'd say, yeah, that's just kind of a part of how this goes. People have a hardship, they show up, you heal that hardship or you give them some hope, and then they go. Oftentimes they'll have another hardship and you'll see them show up again and you'll heal that hardship and then they'll go. I saw that as a problem. I saw that as very short-sighted. I was not in that process shifting their life away from hardship. I was only giving them one-off fixes to individual events, which isn't really helping them get to a long-term benefit. It's just short-term bursts of improvement. Which brings me to how we look at the spiritual path in our imagination, or sometimes we come about it as we're reading about it. We think of this linear path from where we are to where we're trying to get to. We'll call it enlightenment, maybe self-realization, spiritual unfoldment, spiritual maturity, whatever we want to call that point. We have it as this distant point in time and space. Someday I will work my way to there. Some way I'll find some literature, a reading, a talk, a seminar, something that's going to help me get from where I am to there. We have put this point outside of us. We've put it out there. We've put it as a destination to try to get to. And by doing that, we've separated our opportunity to achieve it from us. We've taken it out of our lives. We'll read a book that talks about enlightenment, and we go, enlightenment would be great. I could work towards it someday. It'll be out there. And all of a sudden, we see this linear path from us to that. Well, once we're on the path, we recognize it's a little bit different. The path is a little bit squirrely. It's all over the place. It's got ups and downs. It still has hardships and confusions. We have blessings, we have abundance, and all of a sudden we have loss. And we recognize the path is not linear in any way, shape, or form. Just because we've read a really powerful book or heard a powerful talk, it doesn't mean all of a sudden we've knocked 3 steps off the path. We've gotten that much closer. Sometimes we're knocked back. Sometimes we're knocked sideways. So it's not linear. It is sort of all over the place. But even in that reality and that understanding and that recognition, we still have this concept of it out there. That this idea of this is Shad when he arrives at that place after X amount of meditation. And that's a situation. But when we really look at this practice and we really look at this process and really start to feel the unfoldment in your own life, and you start to pierce the veil, start to peek through moments of what it might be like to be there, you start to recognize that it's actually much closer than we think. It's more like a 2-lane road. It's sitting right beside us all the time. And I've got this glowing orb sort of recognize or to represent spiritual enlightenment, spiritual unfoldment, whatever term you want to use, Christ consciousness. So what we have is this 2-lane road of life. And right next to us is the opportunity for bliss. But oftentimes we're standing in the lane of struggle. And oftentimes we think we've been forced into this lane, or by circumstances of life, we've been put into this lane unfairly, or we've just got a bad hand or dealt a bad card, and we're just in this lane of struggle. Most of the time, completely unaware that the lane right next to us is bliss. Now, what puts us into this lane? Well, believe it or not, every single choice we make, consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously, and collective consciously, is a choice either to be in the lane of struggle or the lane of bliss. Every single day, we are making a choice to be in the lane of struggle or the lane of bliss. And as a matter of fact, we're probably making hundreds of choices within each day to be in the lane of struggle or the lane of bliss. When we see someone walk by and they've got a goofy hat on, we might go, that's a ridiculous hat. That person looks weird. We've just stepped into the lane of struggle, judgment, condemnation. We might have said in that moment, stopped and said, what a beautiful expression that person is sharing with us. And we step into that place of bliss. We've seen it in our personal lives when we make that small choice. The judgment doesn't make us feel good. Adrenaline pumps, it's almost a warring aspect of me being better than them. And then there's a crash where I just don't feel good about what I just did. But when we do that small shift and we choose otherwise and we step into that lane of bliss, we feel that rush of joy. It might just be for that second because it might be a judgment that comes right after. We might get distracted by something real quick, but we have felt these little moments of bliss, these moments of joy, which for me is proof in my life that bliss has to be right here. It's not some distant place far off. It has to be right here because sometimes, consciously or unconsciously, I've stepped right into it and I've felt it. I didn't have to journey 1,000 miles to get there. I have crossed over into that lane and I have felt that bliss. It might have been fleeting. It might have been for an hour. It might have been for a week, but I have been able to cross over, which means it has to be right here in my possibility within my reach right now. But I use the concept of 2 lanes to show us and illustrate that we can be in one lane or the other. As a matter of fact, we build walls in between us and bliss. We can spend years, decades building walls in between us and bliss by creating a story about our suffering, about creating a story about our situation, creating a story about our health, creating a story about the world, creating a story about our partner, creating a story about all the things and all the reasons why we should be in struggle, why we are in struggle, and why we can justify the fact that we're going to stay in struggle. And we'll repeat that story over and over again. And every time we repeat that story, we put another brick in between us and bliss, building up this wall in between us and bliss. But not only we are doing it, we don't have to blame ourselves entirely for this. The feedback from the world around us is justifying our point of view. It says, yes, this is a dangerous place. You should be in fear. Yes, these people are judgmental, so you should judge them. Yes, this is a dangerous person. Stay away from them. Yes, that race is different from you. Yes, that sexual orientation is different from you. Different, different, different. Unlike you. Not God, not God, not God, not God. And every time we hear that message in our life, we lay another brick in between us and bliss, making it that much more difficult to step across the line into the other lane. So it helps us to remember that it really is just a step away, but it's a conscious step. It is a choice step. And I'll actually go back. It might be unconscious, but it is still a step made from a choice to be there. We can gradually shift lanes and work our way over there. And that is the spiritual practice. That is slowly breaking down these bricks, this wall in between us and bliss until we can easily move over into bliss. Working with our consciousness, our body, our diet, our exercise, our relationships, and everything around us. That is the spiritual practice, not a journey from here to there, but a journey from here to here. Moving from where I am as a limited, separate, self and apart, judgmental being to the true essence of who I am, like we practiced in the meditation this morning. We can step into that. That is right next to us. If we are willing to choose to stop putting the obstacles in our own way, to stop allowing the world to convince us that these obstacles are real and necessary. And concurrently, we have to choose, or we have an opportunity to choose, to stop putting the obstacles in other people's way as well. We like to say that bliss or God or the divine is equally accessible to all people, which is true in terms of the distance or the closeness of it. But the obstacles we put in between people and bliss, it doesn't necessarily make it equally accessible for each individual. When we look at sexism, we look at sexual bias, we look at racism, we look at the other things that exist in our society and the world today, we look at war, we look at what's going on, we can see that there are obstacles being put in place between someone's opportunity and bliss by other individuals. Now, don't get me wrong. It is always in our consciousness that we choose bliss. No one can choose that for us. No one can take that away from us, but they can make it more difficult for us to be able to make that choice by distracting us, Again, we talked about the outside world can put these distractions in place so we forget, so we are not thinking about our opportunity for bliss. When there is war, and you look at the circumstance of the world today, if someone's in a state of war, it's very hard for them to think about meditation, prayer, bliss when they're thinking about survival. We can put situations on other people, which makes it very difficult for them, and unfairly so, to have bliss. So not only are we working on this in our own consciousness, we are working on this in the world around us to break down these barriers for ourselves, between us and bliss, to break down these barriers that we have put on other people to make it more difficult for them to find their bliss. But again, bliss is always our conscious choice. We can just put more distractions in a person's life, more difficulties to keep them from accessing it as easily as they might be able to. So going back to the question, where are we going in unity? What is the goal? What is the direction? What is the opportunity? Well, like knowing our founders, the Fillmores, I hope you're also familiar with our 5 basic unity principles. And I'm going to read them because I'm sure they're pretty small for you to see, but I'm going to read them just to remind us what they are. We have number 1. God is the source and creator of all. There is no other enduring power. God is good and present everywhere. Number 2, we are spiritual beings created in God's image. The Spirit of God lives within each person. Therefore, all people are inherently good. 3, we create our life experiences through our way of thinking. Going back to our thinking. 4, there's power in affirmative prayer. I like to add meditation and spiritual practice, which we believe increases our awareness of God. And 5, knowledge of these spiritual principles is not enough. We must live them. Now, I've worked with these 5 principles throughout my entire life on some level or another. And as a minister, I started to study them more in depth. And up until recently did I realize that this is actually a spiritual path. This is a spiritual practice. But normally we read them from top to bottom. I didn't realize it was a spiritual practice until I looked at it from bottom to top. Let me show you. We start here on our spiritual journey. Knowledge of these spiritual principles is not enough. We must live them. First and foremost, the most impactful thing we're going to do on the first step of this journey is to commit ourselves to doing it. Commit ourselves to actually living what we're about to learn, to commit ourselves to use the tools that are going to be given to us, exposed to us through books, seminars, talks, whatever it might be. We commit ourselves to actually apply it, not just hear it or read it, but to actually apply it. That is the first step to build the foundation for where we're going next. Then we move on. There is power in affirmative prayer, meditation, and spiritual practice, I like to add, which we believe increases our awareness of God. Now we have tools. Now we have tools on this journey to help us along. We've committed ourselves to it, that we're going to do it. We're going to be committed to it. We're going to do it every single day. And now we've been given some tools: prayer, meditation, spiritual practice, which we're going to learn through books. We're going to learn through what we're having here in this service. We're going to learn through Unity's tools. We're going to learn through all sorts of stuff. We're given the tools on the journey for our steps moving forward. Now, what comes next? We create our life experiences through our way of thinking. The spiritual practice reveals to us that our consciousness is putting us either in the lane of conflict, of suffering, or in the lane of bliss. We become aware of our own thoughts, our own thinking, and how they're creating the experience that we're having. They may not be creating that experience of that person out there, but they're creating my reaction to it and my feeling from it. So I am reacting to this. My consciousness is building a story, and that story is either one of bliss or that is one of suffering. Once I'm aware of that, I can do something about that. Once I've recognized that, now we work our way up. We are spiritual beings created in God's image. The Spirit of God lives within each person. Therefore, all people are inherently good. Now I become aware of my thoughts. Then I recognize there is no separation between all of us. There are no evil people. There are no evil acts. We are inherently good in ourself, that self that stepped out of the physical body in the meditation earlier this morning. We are inherently good. We are God's children in every way, shape, or form. We start to feel other people's experience. We start to see their experience. We start to have empathy for their experience, not just people, but things and animals and life of the planet itself. We start to recognize ourselves and everything else around us. We are expanding, we are awakening, we are opening. And finally, God is the source and creator of all. There is no other enduring power. God is good and present everywhere. Finally and eventually, we're going to recognize that there is nothing but God. Everything I see, everything I experience, everything in existence is only God, including myself. There is only God. And when I get to that place, that is bliss. I feel and experience the infinite love that is, the infinite joy, the infinite abundance, the infinite life, the infinite energy and wholeness. I am it. I don't just see it. I don't just experience it. I am it at that stage. That is what we might call samadhi. That might be self-realization. That might be bliss. That might be enlightenment, whatever we want to call it, Christ consciousness attainment. That is the path in unity. That is actually where we are going. So when we ask, where am I going in unity? I invite you to imagine what is possible. If we actually were at that phase, the fifth step, we're actually recognizing God in and as and through all things and nothing else but God. What would be possible in our lives? Well, our founders not only saw this possibility, they had an intention and a specific outcome that we were supposed to be living this possibility. They did not put these principles and these tools in place for us to just meddle with and try here and there, and maybe or maybe they're not, they don't work. They put them in place so that we would achieve what they achieved and more, to go from where they left off and more, to expand from where they were beyond. Myrtle, as I recognize her, would be what would be seen as a modern day yogi or guru. In the work she was doing, the healing power she had, when she actually chose her own time to pass. She chose when she was going to pass, she went and laid down and she made that pass. And she let everyone know ahead of time, I'm ready to go. I'm going to do my work now from the other side. That is a spiritually enlightened guru or spirit on this planet. Our founders were expecting us to continue on from where they left off. And so I often imagine them working together in the 1920s and 30s, imagining where unity would be 100 years from then, with what they had achieved in their lifetime, with what they had seen happening with the people around them sitting there imagining and looking at each other and saying, can you imagine what people will be able to do 100 years from now? Well, they actually spoke to it. Charles had this to say: out of the air, we may manufacture the things we eat and wear. This is not a flight of fancy. It's not an assumption of theoretical metaphysics that we may be able to make our food and clothing from the air, but a logical conclusion that follows the understanding of God as the omnipresent source of all that appears. If we truly recognize that there is nothing but God, including ourselves, everything is already here. Everything is already taken care of. Everything is already manifested. There is no separation between anything we need or want in life. It is already here. Charles was aware of that 100 years ago. Myrtle says there is no limit to the so-called miracles that can be performed by those who consecrate themselves wholly to the will and the work of Christ. They are both looking at the tools and the practice and the process that they help to unfold in unity and looking at what could be achievable if these people take from where we were and they run with it. They move forward with it. They were looking at us today, not to come close to where they were, not to equal where they were, but to surpass and shoot beyond where they were. We have an opportunity to do that every single moment of every single day when we make a choice. These choices take us either into struggle or bliss. So think about going from what is possible, because remember, when we say what is possible, it's still referring to something out there. We're saying this is possible, it is something that could be achieved. Well, I'm inviting you to shift those type of words, that type of thinking, and stepping into what is waiting for me. not something that is possible, something that is currently right here and now waiting for me to do something about it. Bliss is waiting for me to step into bliss. It's not a possibility. Bliss is not a possibility in my life. It already exists in my life. It's just waiting for me to recognize it and allow it to unfold. Now, I know we have all of our own healing stories. We have all seen miracles happen around us. We've had friends heal from ailments that were supposed to be incurable. We've had situations in our own lives that we've overcome. We have seen the miracles happen. We have peeked into the other lane to see what bliss looks like, to see what's possible. Now I'm just inviting you to make the miracle the everyday experience. Don't think it as something special. Recognize it as perfectly normal. What we call the miracle really should be everyday living, every aspect of our life, not out there, not something special that could come and happen someday. It is the everyday present of everything we do. And that is the truth as I experience it. Thank you.